Right, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. We're on air again. Another month, another day. It seems like midwinter, but we're not. But welcome, everybody. You were listening to Book Lovers Corner, brought to you on the 4th Tuesday of the month. And we have full house again. We've got three contributors. We've got Sue. Hello, Sue.
Hello, Margie.
And we have Jackie.
Hi, Margie.
And we have Valda.
Hi, Margie.
Okay, so we're kindly sponsored by Almo's, and Sue, thank you. You come from Almo, so you can talk about lots of books. And I'm hoping that today we will really stimulate you for this cold weather to read lots. So, Sue, what would you like to talk about today?
I'm going to talk about Tudor crime.
Oh,
yes.
Everybody gasps.
So carry on?
Yes, keep going.
Okay, Tudor crime. So I've been a follower of C.J. Sansom, the author of said Tudor crime, for some years, and I'm going to talk about the 7th in the Shardlake series. It's called Tombland, which also looks like Tom Bland, which is a bit disconcerting. But it's really Tombland, yes. And Tombland is a real place in Norwich. It's a centre of activity well before the Normans arrived. And in that area was the palace of the Earl of East Anglia, St Michael's Church, the largest in Norwich. And it's also the site of the Maid's Head, which is reputed to be the oldest pub in England, apparently. And Queen Elizabeth's stayed there, the first one.
The first, yes,
yeah.
Okay.
It also features in the book. Shardlake stays there. So the name Tombland comes from nothing to do with death or cemeteries. It comes from Old English words meaning open ground.
Okay.
Or an empty space.
There we are, we're
hence,
learning again. Yes.
And it was used as the main marketplace for Norwich and the hub of commercial activity and town life. And it's now an historic centre with numerous restaurants and cafes and galleries and stuff.
Is that the one in the centre of Norwich?
Apparently so.
Because there's a market there. I wonder if that's the same one.
It's the old Tombland area, probably.
Yes, probably is, yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So a bit about the author, C.J. Sansom. He has a PhD in history and is also practices as a solicitor, and he brings that knowledge straight into the Shardlake novels. He lives in Sussex, and I've already said that this is the 7th in the series. We first met lawyer Matthew Shardlake in a book called Dissolution, which was published in 2003 and set in the time of Henry VIII, when Shardlake was recruited by Thomas Cromwell, who was Henry's enforcer, to investigate events surrounding the death of an official working on the dissolution of the monasteries, obviously. By lamentation, number 6, set in 1546, Henry is slowly dying and taking a long time to do so. And Shardlake is working for Queen Catherine Parr, the last queen, in order to recover a stolen religious manuscript she has written, which is radical for its day and distinctly Protestant, and which could be used against her by her many enemies and Catholic sympathisers.
Was this obviously when Henry was going backwards and forwards about changing things?
Yes, it was right at the end.
Yeah, one minute he was going to go being a Catholic again, and the next minute no, and you had to tread very carefully.
Yes, yes. Being in the court at that time must have been horrendous.
It's been scary
It's
stuff.
very scary. Well, there's a lot of head going,
Yes, yes. And they didn't just cut them off and put them away. They put them on a pike somewhere. So, yeah. But anyway, back to Matthew Shardlake. He is a lawyer's son of a yeoman farmer, so he has reasonably humble beginnings. So he must have been a bright boy at school. He has a deformity of his back which pains him, and which also means he's regarded with suspicion and also derision.
Yes, a lot of that time was, if you had any disability, it was cursed.
Yes.
Or it was something strange.
Yes, he's an evil.
Yes.
He must have been evil.
Yeah.
He's never married, but I think he'd really like to. He'd like to be a family man. And he's of a cautious and slightly melancholic disposition. He's very careful in what he says. He's very analytical. It's not many jokes in these books.
Wasn't a very jokey time, was it?
But he's clever. and he's obviously done really well negotiating through the upheavals of the Tudor period, because while Henry was changing his mind, Shardlake has also been coming to a decision about Catholicism or Protestantism, and in fact whether he has any religion at all. So it's quite interesting to track that. He's not young, he's probably 50-ish by now. And he describes his hair as being white, and he describes himself as being an old man, which 50, I guess, in those days was.
I mean, life expectancy wasn't very great at that time.
Yeah. So in Tombland, Shardlake is working for Thomas Parry, who manages the financial affairs of the Lady Elizabeth, later Queen Elizabeth I.
Yes.
Edward VI is the reigning monarch. He's 9 years old when he came to the throne, and Henry had set up a council to rule England and oversee the young king until his majority. But that council has devolved power to the Lord Protector, who is the Duke of Somerset, who is the eldest brother of Catherine Seymour, who was Edward's mother. So Tudor politics is all about family.
Yes.
Yeah. So Henry's war with France have been really costly, and in 1547 Somerset, or the Lord Protector, is now engaged in a war with Scotland in a fruitless attempt to unite the two countries. He really thought that Edward should marry Mary, Queen of Scots, who lived in France, but who married the French king. He
That's
died,
right.
and then she came back to
Yes.
Scotland.
I know.
And there was a series of disasters ensued. So I just
Actually,
love
trying to
Tudor
follow those
politics.
family things,
Yeah.
feuding, and mind you, I don't think it's all that much difference these days with.
But they armed their people and just sent them out to fight whoever they happened to dislike at the time,
Yes.
or felt that they could benefit
Yes.
from losing.
And there was a
those
lot
people.
of infighting going on all the time between the
Yes.
different dukes and
Yes.
princes and
Yes,
whatever.
because they could raise armies as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So times are hard. Inflation is high. Taxes are high. Starting to sound like New Zealand. The coinage has been debased. Times are particularly hard for the poor, and in rural areas this is made worse by the practice of enclosure, where the wealthy landowners would take land,
Yes.
normally farmed by numerous small farmers,
Yes.
take it for grazing sheep,
And that
because
was,
wool
that was
prices
called
were
the common
high.
land, wasn't
Was
it?
the common-
commons.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 So enclosures.
But that was also the food-producing land. So if you graze sheep instead of crops,
Yes.
Yeah.
people tend to starve.
There's more money in sheep.
Yes, there was. Wool prices were high. So after Henry's death, Catherine Parr had married the Protector's younger brother, Thomas Seymour, and had subsequently died in childbirth. And Thomas Seymour comes to a sticky end. He's what's the word? He has his head cut off by his brother for treason.
loving families. My
Yes.
goodness.
Yeah, it's just fabulous, isn't it?
Yes.
So Parry, getting back to Parry, in the pay of Elizabeth, asks Shardlake to go to Norwich to investigate the murder of a woman called Edith Boleyn, and the accused is her husband John Boleyn, who's a distant relative,
To Anne.
of course,
To Anne.
of
Of Anne.
Anne,
Of the Boleyn
and
family.
hence,
Yes, because
Elizabeth.
they came from that area.
yeah. So they're,
The Boleyns. Yes.
yeah, Anne Boleyn was Elizabeth's
Now
mother.
tell me, at the back of this book, is there one of those charts which says who is who?
No,
Oh,
there's a very good essay though about
The essay is
his
brilliant.
interpretation
Oh,
of
okay.
the events. Yeah. So John Boleyn is obviously saying it wasn't me, my lord. His wife Edith, had disappeared 9 years previously and had been declared dead, and he had remarried. So Elizabeth wants the matter resolved and will go as far as seeking a royal pardon if she has to, if he's convicted. So Shardlake and his assistant Nicholas set out for Norwich, where they enlist the support of his former assistant Barrack. Barrack has married, and there's been a falling out with Shardlake, but nonetheless they are reunited in this book. because Barrack is pretty familiar with Norwich. So progress in the case is slow, and made slower by the lack of evidence and also the hostility of Edith's family, particularly her father, who's a Gowan Reynolds, and her sons, twin sons, who believe their father to be guilty.
The whole family's vile, isn't it?
Oh, they're terrible. The twins are just obnoxious. They're violent thugs.
Yes.
And,
Yeah.
Happy families. Happy families. But now tell me, is this all based on truth, or is this he's used
well,
a
there's
bit
an
of...
interweaving of
okay.
truth and fiction. I
Yes.
mean, John and Edith Boleyn did not exist.
Okay, I was going to say, can one trace this back to real people?
No. But
So-
certainly...
But the times and some of the characters.
The times and some of the characters are only too real.
Right.
Yeah. So as this case drags on, the background to this is the countryside is in a state of upheaval, and peasant rebellions spring up across the country in response to the increasing poverty and
Yes.
the enclosures, and also the religious change. They're about to implement the new prayer book.
Of course, yes.
So East Anglia, where Norwich is, Norfolk, was particularly radical, and several protest camps sprang up during what was soon described as, and I love this term, the commotion time.
A commotion. Oh, wonderful, yes.
It is good, isn't
Yes.
it?
But he obviously knows his history to be able to centre your story with enough recognisable thing, but warning to those who read it and think it's a fact.
There is fact. I mean,
Yes,
this
but
whole...
I mean, if you take all these different characters, they're not all real.
No.
Yes.
And when you read his essay at the back, you'll soon discern
Okay.
which is fact and who are the fictional characters that, blunder across these facts. So in July 1549, at an annual fair in a place called Wyndham, which looks like Wymondham, but it's Wyndham because I
Yes.
looked it up, in Norfolk, a group began to knock down fences enclosing the sheep. So this was pretty radical. This was an affront to the landowners, owners. But when the group arrived at the property of a Robert Kett, who was a real person, he agreed to his enclosures being destroyed and ended up leading the group back to Wyndham. Subsequently, the rebels marched on Norwich with Kett and his brother and set up camp on Mousehold Heath, which was just outside Norwich. The camp existed for 7 weeks and contained about an estimated 8,000 or 9,000 men.
Good grief.
So that's a huge logistical exercise.
Yes.
All the food and other things they
They
need.
do. He does describe how the latrines are made, which I thought was quite interesting because I'm always interested. Well,
Yes,
how did they,
the practicalities of it, yes.
Yeah.
But that's a true issue. That's a true fact.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Yep. So under Kett's leadership, the camp was well organised, and they actually fought 3 engagements with the king's troops, and also got up a petition listing 29 injustices and asking for fairer treatment across a lot of issues. Eventually, the rebels took control of Norwich and took the mayor into captivity, but they were finally defeated by a force led by the powerful Earl of Warwick, another real person. Kett and his brother were both captured and subsequently hanged in chains, which I believe is particularly gruesome because they would put them in chains and then raise them up like to the top of the castle wall and just leave them hanging there.
And what did they just die of?
They just died
Exposure
of pain, exposure, starvation.
and probably blood rushing to the wrong places and things.
Yeah, it
I
would
have to
take
say,
them a long time to die.
Medieval times and those times had some really interesting ways of death.
Really gruesome. There were no boundaries.
No.
There was nothing
Talk
to
about
stop people
torture
pretty much doing what I wanted.
and horrible things.
Burning, crushing.
Tearing apart.
Yeah, hanging, drawing, quartering.
Oh, that's really not a good time to live.
No. Okay, so I've gone into a lot of background, but this provides an exciting context for Shardlake's investigation, which is concluded satisfactorily. The villain is unearthed and justice is done, sort of. The book is a solid read of over 800 pages, which includes an interesting
the
analysis.
tomb you have lying in front? Show it to everybody.
It's a doorstop.
No, in front of your camera.
in front of
In
you.
front of your camera.
It's a doorstop.
It's in front of you.
I still don't know where the camera is.
There it is.
Yes. Now turn it around and we can see it.
There it is. Tombland.
Yes.
Tombland.
Brilliant.
But it
A
isn't.
work of
It
art.
looks like a tomb.
Yeah.
Yes, it does rather.
Yeah. So obviously I enjoyed this book a lot, as I have the rest of the series. They're not all of a standard, there's some good ones and some not so good ones, but overall it's a great series. Sansom's a very good writer, and I'd put these books on a par with that other great writer of Tudor fiction, Hilary Mantel.
Oh yes,
Yes.
she's
And
fantastic.
we were just discussing the long wait for the third novel in that
Yes, get on
series.
with it, Hilary.
Yeah, rattle you. Yeah, what's it? He brings together his fictional characters in a believable way and interweaves them with real figures from history, such as the Kett brothers, William Cecil, who was I think was the spy master
Yes,
for his
he
Yes, he was. Yes.
Richard Rich, who was a pretty nasty character, and Richard Southwell, who was a large landowner and also a political force. The action scenes are well described, and parts of the book are quite violent, but everything is observed by the analytical eye of Shardlake, who's never one for overstatement, so it's all pretty matter of fact. But he's also a kind and seemingly fair observer. He has sympathy for the people who suffer, which is fairly uncommon, I would imagine, in those days. It's also Shardlake's voice that tells us the tale, and each book we've come to know him a little better, and that's why I think Sansom's quite skillful. It's not all revealed in book one.
Okay, so how many books are there so far?
This is number 7.
Good grief. And it's all set in that time.
Yep.
In one man's lifetime.
Yes. Yes.
There's a lot
Probably
going
10 or
on then.
15. Probably 10 or 15 years.
Okay.
So he's been quite busy. It's also interesting to read things like his reaction to the local dialect in Norfolk and his observation on his travels outside London. It was like visiting a foreign country,
Right.
and it's only a distance of about 100
Yes,
miles.
yes. But Norfolk was a very important area where the kings and queens were concerned, because a lot of those families came from that area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the Duke of Norfolk was immensely powerful.
they're
but,
very powerful.
Put in prison.
Yep.
He escaped getting his head cut off. He kept his head. Lucky man. The book also contains a number of themes which are relevant to today's audience, and I found this quite interesting too. And I think it's probably deliberate. These include such things like lesbianism, eating disorders, domestic violence, and child abuse, as well as issues of inequality, poverty, wealth, position, and power, which you kind of would expect.
Yes.
Yes.
But
Yes,
the
yes.
others, you think, oh, that's pretty cool that he's included that.
Yeah.
These themes are skillfully introduced as they remain within the context of the time. So certainly it's described, this woman Edith was described as being very strange and refusing to eat for long periods of time.
Okay, so she had an eating disorder.
One would guess so.
Mind you, sometimes I think the food in those days was a little bit suspect, so she could have had a reason for that.
Well, yeah, but I think well, there are other things about her that you can say that
lead to it.
that,
Yes.
that eating disorder is a response to her
Okay. Yes.
upbringing.
Situation.
So this great book is my idea of a perfect Christmas read. It's long, satisfying, full of action and interest, and the renewal of old acquaintances.
Oh, lovely. Now, it's the sort of book you give to someone too who's going on a long summer holiday,
Yes.
camping under the stars, having nothing to do but read 800 pages.
But is prepared to read to take on a solid read.
Yes.
It's not light, romantic fiction or whatever. And it's not crime, wham, bang, thank you, ma'am. It's a solid read.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you so much. I mean, it really stimulates one to think about those times and then just look at ourselves and say, okay, it can't be so bad.
No, I always learn so much from reading a Shardlake novel because it makes
Okay.
me look up stuff.
Yes.
Yes, okay.
That's one of the things about them, that they send you straight to Google.
Yes,
Oh,
they
right.
do. Yeah.
And
You
double
think,
check.
well, even the pronunciation. You think, I better check that pronunciation. They're a bit weird up there. So,
But there are a lot of English little villages that sound absolutely weird, and you have to learn how they say it. Yes.
But it's also very interesting because you three have, got a passion for history,
Yes.
and I don't have that passion. And I would find I would need to have some sort of tree of people and how they're all connected.
Yes, that's why I asked.
I need that sort of way of informing me to help me follow things through. That works for me.
But a lot of historical novels do have a little tree at the back because very often they have these complex relationships because they're second marriages or out of wedlock children or somebody's uncle's child
But
appears.
if you read enough historical fiction and historical crime, it's in here.
It's in here, but what
okay.
I'm
You just
saying,
know. As soon
you
as you
need
see
to-
those
for
names, you
those that-
know.
But for those that don't get
Exactly.
that,
You need to have your little family
that's
tree
right.
and your little
Yes,
connections
absolutely.
beside you.
And
Yes.
double check back. Even the most complicated ones I find are the Russian. Any Russian historical novel, because they duke so and so and so and so, and unless you have a tree, you don't know who's who. And also in those times, often they all had their own power. So there were power games going on all the time, and who was important and who wasn't, and all this sort of stuff. Yes, great. Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome.
So you've finished that. Have you got another one for Christmas now?
I haven't got anything lined up actually. That's my job this week.
Oh, it's to find some good
To
ones.
find me a good fat book to read over Christmas.
You're an avid reader. Thank you so much. Okay, we're going to move on. I know you need to slip out soon.
During the break.
Okay, we'll do it when we have our musical break, which we'll actually we'll do it after Valda. Valda's going to talk to us about her book, and then yes, Valda, you going next?
Yes.
And Jackie's going at the end.
Yes.
Is that right? I'm getting confused because you're not sitting in a row that I normally have. You mustn't upset my little viewpoints. Okay. Valda, you want to keep going?
Yes, I'm quite happy to, but I might overrun when Sue needs to go.
We might break you in the middle and say,
Yes, okay.
you need to go. You can just put up your hand. We are in school, you know.
Okay. Okay, just
Okay.
up stakes and leave.
Keep going.
Right, I'm talking about books by Peter Wollobin. So there's this book here, which is The Hidden Life of Trees, and another book called The Secret Network of Nature. And I got interested, first of all, in The Hidden Life of Trees, he was interviewed by Kim Hill one Saturday morning, and I found him very inspirational. And I thought, I must get that book. So I've got it out of the library, and I've subsequently also got The Secret Network of Nature out of the library. Now, Peter Wollobin is a German guy born in 1964, and I've been listening to a podcast where he spoke to a program, and he grew up at a very young age wanting to work with nature, wanting to work with trees. And as he went through schooling, he decided that in fact what he would really like to do, he found out about forester, and he thought, now that's what I want to be. I'll be a forester because I'll be working with trees. However, he did. He went away and trained as a forester, and he went to forestry school and then became a government forest ranger in 1987. And he worked in the Eiffel Forest in mid-Germany, and I was quite intrigued about that subsequently because I cycled through there in July. And so it was really interesting in retrospect to think that, I'd actually cycled through the forest that he had written his book about.
You hadn't read it before?
No,
okay.
no, and I had known about the book before, but I hadn't known it was the Eiffel Forest that he had been involved
writing
with.
about, yes.
And so he was involved as a forester, not in preserving the forest, which is what, as a young lad, he thought a forester would be, but actually in what he was doing was, sort of building forests for producing timber. And in retrospect, he saw that as really butchering the forest, which is quite opposite to what he really wanted to be when he grew up, which was about preserving the forest. And it wasn't until quite some time that he knew things were out of sync, but he started doing sort of survival courses in the forest, and then having tourists come to camp in the forest. And he built log cabins so that they could have, people could have forest holidays. He organised natural burial place in the forest. So on doing all these things which fitted much more in with his philosophy of life about what a forest should be, that he started realising just how out of sync the job was relative to what his philosophy was. And so he started really thinking about the forest in quite a different way from what he had done in his job as a government forester. And at the same time, Aachen University were doing research work in the forest. And Aachen has got the most wonderful cathedral with mosaic tiles in the ceiling, and I should imagine the university is a similar sort of vintage and beautiful building. And so the research that they were doing and his own thinking about what he was doing and what he was learning opened his eyes up. And so he said that something similar happened over many guided tours I gave around the forest I managed, when I talked about things like ecological forest management, or took people through our forest cemetery, the final forest, which I thought was a really really appropriate name. No one corrected me or remarked on my verbal shortcomings, but there were always questions afterwards, and I soon noticed I was using too many technical terms and giving an impersonal, boring recitation of facts about something close to my heart. And what was close to his house was the wonderful forest ecosystem and the threat it was under. So from the moment he started speaking, the response was subtle but painful. And he then, because of that experience, started to rethink how he talked about the forest. So was gradual over quite a period of time, through a lot of learning experiences, that he came into the style that he has now writes. And his wife had said to him, well, why don't you write some notes in your words about what you want to say to these people? You know, take yourself out from the knowledge, but go into what you know and put that down. And so that was what ended up in these books. And it's quite interesting because the writing is quite about the forest is quite anthropomorphic. And a lot of people have criticised them about that. But I find it really interesting because I've always been interested in the bush and in how things work and ecological systems and so on. And so I found it really interesting that the way he writes connects with the way I see things. And I think that the way he has written enables people who may not be aware to connect in with a new way perhaps of thinking for them. Although it's not for me, I can appreciate that. And so he talks about things like something that I did know about. Giraffes would eat acacia trees. Now you might know this being from Africa, South Africa. And they can destroy the trees. But what the tree does is it releases chemicals into the air, which are spread around, and they drift to other trees, and that actually protects the acacia trees from more eating of their leaves. And so the acacia trees are protecting themselves.
Yes, they've
So they
developed a
actually have,
system.
so it's like a giraffe deterrent.
It is a giraffe deterrent.
Oh,
Absolutely.
okay.
And so, and I had read about that quite some time ago in some science magazine. And so I think, how interesting is that? Now, not only that, what about insects? Because if the deterrent goes through the air, insects may not detect that. Well, what they do, the saliva that the insects put on the tree actually is a chemical symbol for the trees to produce attract predators for the insects. Does that make sense?
No, say it again.
So the insects come and feed on the tree.
Yes.
So the tree, the saliva from the insects reacts with the tree, the leaves of the tree, which produces a chemical symbol, chemical that in fact repels, that attracts the predators of the insects.
The insects. Okay.
All right, I'm with you. Yes, okay.
Yes.
Yep, gotcha.
That's pretty clever.
So the book is full of all sorts of fascinating things like that. And so when you go on to the secret network of nature, so it's not just about trees, you've got the whole network of nature. So, for example, in Yellowstone Park, the wolves died out.
Yes.
Well, they reintroduced the wolves, which you may have heard about.
Yes,
That's
I read
right.
that one.
Successfully.
That was very interesting.
And you've heard about introducing the wolves, so that means the deer didn't roam so freely, which meant the willows and so on grew, and you had then more plant life.
Yep.
Rivers and creeks weren't sliding away; they were,
And the beavers came back.
and the beavers came back.
I thought that was the best.
So,
Yes.
I mean, and it's just not only that, the whole ecology,
Ecosystem,
the whole
yes.
ecosystem blossomed away.
But I think that's seen in a lot of places. If you take out a species, things go out of kilt.
But it makes common sense,
Yes,
doesn't
yes,
it? And we
does,
actually
yes.
all know that. And
Yeah.
I mean, today on the news, they were talking about there'd been some scientists down in the Mackenzie country had been measuring the nitrates in the water and the effect of dairy farming into the water system,
Yes.
and therefore that's impact on the whole ecosystem. And so, I mean, we have it daily. There are stories within our own media about the impact of different things in our
Yes.
own ecosystems in New
yes.
Zealand. But what he does, to me, it's not new. But what it does is brings together a whole lot of fascinating stuff. And one of the chapters, if I read out the chapters in here, of wolves, bears and fish, salmon in the trees, that was absolutely fascinating, because with the chemical analysis that they can do these days, they can actually work out that some of the chemicals in the salmon that have gone into the rivers within forest land as the salmon die, which are eaten by various predators and which are then absorbed through the ground into the trees, it's the chemicals from the salmon.
Oh my goodness.
So salmon in the tree. Why deer taste bad to trees? Creatures in your coffee. Ants, secret sovereigns. Just really,
Fascinating, yes.
really fascinating.
Now, Val, is the sort of book you could pick up, read a chapter,
and
go back and read
you
another
could.
chapter.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
it's one of those.
Because each chapter requires a little bit of cogitation, really. And one of the so there's research not being done only by Aachen University, but also by University of UBC, British Columbia,
Right.
and I think in Australia. And one of the things they found is how trees are very much like a social system that we think of as with people. And so in the chapters in The Hidden Life of Trees, He's got friendships, the language of trees, social security, love, the tree lottery, slowly does it, forest etiquette, etc., etc. So that, and a lot of this can be explained by what he calls not the World Wide Web, which we're all very familiar with, the Wood Wide Web, which is to do with the fungal interlacing between trees underneath the soil.
Yes.
So,
okay,
Yep.
And so I just recommend that for people to make sense of what's happening to us in New Zealand, make sense of what's happening internationally, and just very, very thought-provoking about what a delicate balance it is between all living things, and how we as human beings perhaps aren't helping.
Well, we put our foot in it, literally. Yes. Gosh, Valda, that's fantastic. So what are the two books again? And I must admit I couldn't pronounce his surname when I read it.
Well, I've actually listened to
so
things,
it's
and
Wallaben. And he's German.
Yes, he's German.
Okay.
And he now is a forester, managing the forest in his own way in the Eiffel forest area.
Okay.
In Germany.
Fascinating.
And The Hidden Life of Trees and The Secret Network of Nature.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Now, Sue, if you want to do your little slither out the door, I'll put some music on.
I shall. Thank you.
And thank you very much for coming.
Goodbye to everyone.
All right.
And Merry Christmas.
And Merry Christmas to you
But
too.
before Sue goes, Sue, we're going to be seeing you next year.
Yes, you'll be joining us again.
Each month.
Yes.
It'll be lovely.
I'm become one of the in crowd.
Oh, joining the in crowd. Thank you, Sue. That's lovely.
I'll see you soon.
All right, see you then.
If not
Bye.
tomorrow.
So we're playing, just because it's horrible cold weather, we are playing, and we're coming up for Christmas, See Amid the Winter Snow, for those of you who remember this
Yes,
one.
most appropriate, because I put my fire on before I came out.
Okay, thank you. Well, that was beautiful. I'm glad you guys could hear it. Sometimes you can't when I don't have the things right. And Sue's left us, but she represents Almo's Books, who support us greatly, and we have to always thank Almo's for supporting this program. Now, our last and not least person is Jackie, who's going to talk about a book that I didn't even know that the author wrote those books, because it's very well known.
I'm going to talk about a book called Holding, published in 2016, and it was written by Graham William Walker, whom we know better as Graham Norton.
I know, I thought that was so interesting, yes.
Norton is his great-grandmother's maiden name. Oh. Now, he's an Irish television, radio presenter, comedian, actor and author. He has written 2 autobiographical books. This was his first novel, and he has a second novel that's just been published. I haven't read it yet. He's a 5-time BAFTA TV award winner. He has been on practically every BBC production, TV and radio that you can imagine. But I first saw him as playing Father Furlong in a Father Ted series in 1996.
Good grief, that's a long time ago.
I know, and I just was
totally... He must have been memorable for you.
He was totally memorable. He played the part of Father Furlong. He played in 3 episodes, but my favourite was the one where he kept Father Ted awake all night singing folk songs with the St. Luke's youth group while they were all trapped together in a caravan. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. This novel is set in a rural village in Ireland. It's set in modern day, but the action goes back over 20 years, so you're looking at a bit of history as well. The village is called Duneen, and it's never had much drama, but all the people have secrets and unfulfilled lives, and he does that so well. Sergeant P.J. Collins hasn't always been this overweight. Mother of 2, Brid Riordan, hasn't always been an alcoholic. And elegant Evelyn Ross hasn't always felt that her life was a total waste. It was really depressing. But one day, on a new development, the workmen uncover the bones of an adult. Now, could these be the bones of Tommy Burke, a former love of both Brid and Evelyn, who disappeared many years ago? And if it is, was it murder? As PJ struggles to solve a genuine case for the first time in his life, he unearths a community's worth of anger and resentments, secrets and regrets. And to keep things moving along, the bones of a baby are discovered a little later on. Ooh. Now, this is, I think, quite interesting because this village is set in rural Catholic Ireland. Yes. Graham Norton is a Northern Irish.
I thought he was Northern Irish, when you said that, yes.
But the whole business of being Irish, you have to be, you've got to soak all these things up by osmosis.
Yes, you do.
The whole thing,
yes,
it doesn't really matter.
Yes, remember the Catholics in Northern Ireland too, quite a lot actually.
Quite fanatical, and some awful attitudes displayed. Then, we have... All right, so he's poor old PJ, struggling to solve a genuine case for the first time. And to keep things moving along, the bones of a baby are discovered a little. As well, the supercilious Detective Superintendent Dunn from Cork arrives to take over the case, treading on all the local toes as he does so. Now, Superintendent Dunn, when he turns up, just thinks that he is being sent to the ends of the earth for a punishment.
Oh, okay.
And the people in the village view him as an alien. He's an alien. He doesn't dress like them. He doesn't talk like them.
And he comes from the city, probably.
Well, he's a city bloke. Yes. He's a city bloke. And he just thinks they're a bunch of yokels. He has no time for them at all. And he's not very nice to the poor P.J. Collins. All right. So I say I loved this book. Now, Norton's skill in presenting whole-rounded but flawed people who maintain a facade that enables them to function as though normal is very good.
So he's an excellent writer, you're saying? He's an excellent writer.
He's an excellent writer.
How interesting, because he's a very talented
he's an excellent
TV presenter.
He has the characters. He just has them organised in a few words.
Okay.
And they're totally believable. You don't have to be told again and again and again what this person is like or what they might be likely to do. You can see how they go. It's very, very good. Okay, so I identified with aspects of all of them. Now, again, a Catholic upbringing, an Irish
Yes.
Catholic upbringing in New Zealand, has some very strong parallels with this village.
How intriguing.
And I just thought, these are people I know.
Right.
But of
that-
course,
that
you can
me-
do that with most things, I suppose. But in this case, I
No.
thought, oh, yes, I can. I thought it was both funny and very sad as the layers of deceit were slowly peeled back and things were brought to light that had been buried for so long. And that happens again and again and again. And a friend of mine said the other day, and she was doing some genealogy, she said, I've given up on doing genealogy with my family. She said, because I keep finding that there are children that nobody had ever heard of
Yes.
that
Yeah.
pop up.
Oh,
Yeah,
very,
I
very
You
think-
have
common.
no idea who your ancestors are.
Yeah, that's...
And aunts
Yeah.
and things, or uncles that disappeared to India.
Yes.
Which is in my husband's family, and he isn't listed anywhere, and yet he existed.
Well, this is-
I mean,
this
we
is-
have a great story, maybe what did happen, but
Well, at least my friend said at least one of her ancestors who was sent off in disgrace to Canada was probably pregnant before
Yes.
she got there.
Well, I think that happened in my grandfather's family. There
Yes.
was a lot of young women were pregnant
and that just,
and disappeared.
just sent
Yes.
off, yes.
And-
And so
offspring
trying to trace your
fetched up
bloodline is a
recently.
joke.
Yeah.
So, where are we? Oh.
so does the church play quite a big role in this little
Well,
village?
yes, it does, because this is where the secrets and the lies come
Yes.
in. And people do things for the best reasons,
Right.
given the attitudes of the times.
Of the times,
And
yes.
this is
Yeah.
where it all becomes, when you look back on it, you think, what on earth were people thinking?
I know.
Why would you do that to somebody?
Yes.
And create misery for at least 2 generations to come.
Yes,
It's just
yes,
downright misery
yes.
because of this one thing that has happened here in the background. So, I'm saying he's a gifted writer of the sly twist, and that's what I like. It's very much like his TV show where he has a sly twist.
Yes, he often brings
Oh,
his
he
little
comes
tail.
up with a... Yes.
Yes, and although this is not
Right.
quite as raunchy because it's about
Yeah.
people and it's not about making making a punch on you.
Yeah.
But at the end of part 1, the bones of the adult have been identified through DNA, and the result has not been as expected. So this threw up more questions for the beleaguered inhabitants of Dunedin. So while everybody thought, oh, this is what's his name's bones,
Yes.
actually it turned out not quite.
Yes, okay.
And so now people are really starting to look at each other
Well,
and
I think DNA must have thrown, the kibosh in with a lot of stories because
Well.
suddenly they're not related,
Well,
or they're
exactly.
related in the wrong way.
Exactly,
That there's
yes.
some incest that's gone on or
there's-
something
so
dreadful.
incest comes to light. Yes, all
Well, there was
sorts.
just recently with Tutankhamun, there was a program, and
And
he was the offspring of 2 siblings.
yes, that's right. So there's a whole lot of these
Yeah.
things as they start discovering them, and you start thinking maybe you shouldn't, as you say, don't go into genealogy or DNAs too quickly.
Well, yes. Do ignore your DNA if you're going to go through genealogy. Just take it at face value. So, but here is the beginning of part 2, and its promise of spring and nicer times. So I'm just going to read a little. 4 months had passed, 4 long dark months. But now finally some tight green buds had appeared, and a few clumps of daffodils hinted at the bright yellow blankets that were to follow. Some days the clouds would part and tease the good people of Dunedin. The children returning from school stayed out after the bus dropped them off, and their thin, high voices could be heard until it was dark. Cormac Burns spent one whole Sunday sanding and oiling the picnic tables before taking them out of the shed and placing them in a neat row in front of the pub. It was hardly cafe society, but it gave the smokers an air of respectability, rather than standing huddled against the wall like some very unappetising prostitutes.
Oh, shit. But now this is written as today, so they've got all this business you can't smoke inside and the pub's changed.
Yes, so all the smokers have been
Yes.
banished to the outs.
Poor old smokers again.
And then that's the sort of thing he can do. So you're
Okay.
lulled, you're sort of reading along, and you've got the picture of this lovely daffodils, blankets, and then these people furtively smoking up against the wall. So I really like his stuff. The villagers start to unburden themselves, and a story, long suppressed, emerges that is revealed as the catalyst for led up to the bodies being buried. The shame and guilt felt by the innocent party in the telling of this story is heartbreaking.
So the baby and the other skeleton, they're related?
Yes, they are.
Okay, they find that through DNA again.
Well, yes, but there is a twist, and I'm not going to
don't
say
tell
what
us
the
the twist,
is,
but I mean,
obviously.
yes, okay.
But yes, but there were things that happened, and when you read the book, I have to say that I started to think, hang on, there's something else here, there's something
Yes.
else. And when we came to the denouement, I thought, yes, of course, I should have seen that, because
Yes.
there were hints at it,
Right.
but so subtly done.
Yes.
And if you understood the characters of the people at the time, given the attitudes at the time,
Yes.
and given the church's role in unexpected and possibly unwanted pregnancies,
Yes.
and what
okay.
happened to those children, then you start to think, oh
Yes.
yes, I can see how this would happen.
Yes. Well,
And
they-
it would be done for the best of
No, I
motives.
know.
Oh.
But we've always got to read, and I think we've spoken it before, not through today's eyes, but in that time.
Yes.
What were the values and the mores of the time?
Yes.
Rather than seeing it through now. And it does seem, terrible when you look back, but at the time people didn't see it as
No,
that.
they didn't see it like
Well,
that.
on the news today, there was the whole business about the laundry.
The Magdalene
The
laundries.
Magdalene laundry
Yes.
was on the news today.
Oh,
There's
dreadful.
I think they're trying to.
Well, they're going to dig up for the bodies of the babies.
Yes.
It's that sad,
and
terrible
then
story.
DNA again.
And the DNA of who were they and were they related.
And yes, exactly. And in this case, the role of the priest at the time, he was a very compassionate man, but he was also of his time.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when you realise what's been going on, you think, okay, he probably did the very best thing he could do given the circumstances. The problem is that all of the people who are involved in the original issue are still alive. They're much older, and their lives have been frozen.
Yes.
They've been
yes,
paralysed.
Yes.
They're traumatised.
Yes.
They've never been able to speak about it.
Yes.
And they've never been able to share with each other, even because
Right.
one of the reasons for this whole business, for the bodies being buried as they were, was to keep it secret.
Yes. Yes.
So that you're
se-
protecting people.
secrets destroy people
Yes,
eventually because they eat away.
and even now, it would be difficult. It would be a difficult situation to manage, but it wouldn't be managed in that way.
No. Well, as we said,
It just
Leon,
wouldn't.
it's just a different.
It's just totally
time.
different.
Yes.
So eventually the truth comes out, but not all of it is revealed to everybody. And I found that very interesting, that there were certain aspects of the truth where the main characters who had uncovered it just said no, not
Okay.
telling everybody that, keeping
Yeah.
that one.
Okay.
Because
he
there are
writes
still
with a lot
people
of
alive who would have been hurt by
Yes, I was going to say he writes with a lot of compassion.
it.
Actually, that's interesting. Yes.
And he writes with real compassion. It was really interesting. PJ and Dunn eventually develop a mutual respect for each other. Lives are irreversibly changed, mostly for the better, and the novel ends with hope and the possibility of love.
Oh, that's good. Not
And
one of
it was
these
just,
dismal.
it was so nice, and
Yes.
it was very plausible.
Okay.
Because one of the characters that I particularly liked was Sergeant PJ Collins. And I desperately wanted for something nice to happen to PJ Collins. Because he
yes.
struggled all the way.
Yes.
He struggled. He kind of understood, of course, he understood his village better than Dunn
Yes,
from Cork
yes.
did. But Dunn, at first, was by the book only.
Right.
And
And does he
because-
soften eventually? And
Yeah,
gets
and
to
PJ
understand?
kept saying, but these people, I know them, and if
Yes.
we do it this way, you're more likely
yeah,
to get
yeah.
Yes.
what you want.
Okay.
So there was quite a lot of that. But of course, basically, in the end, it was about the Catholic Church
Yes. Okay.
and what happened to
Yes.
people.
People. Oh.
So there we are. So that's Graham Norton. I think I will be definitely looking for his second book. I
So
don't know what
does
it's
he
about.
publish it under the name Graham Norton?
Yes.
Okay, so when we
Yes.
go into the bookshop, we can look for Graham Norton, and there it is.
Yes.
Well, we're coming nearly to the end of our day, and that's a lovely, hopeful way to end on a hopeful book, and also about the forest. So we've had two, and a very big tomb on.
Tombland.
Tombland. But Valda, what was your books again?
And perhaps if I put
Can you
them
show
over
them
this
up
way,
there?
can
Yes.
Does that
Talk, and then it'll
Right.
catch you up.
the Hidden Life of Trees, and the Secret Network of Nature. And the comment was by one reviewer, he is communicating the forest and the ecology, just like Jacques Cousteau
with
did
his
with the oceanography, you know. And I thought, but that was a lovely.
nice way of
That's a
putting it.
lovely way.
Yeah.
We in our family we have a very strong connection with that because we got TV when his programs were on, and every Sunday night we put the children to bed and we'd sit and eat, and we made the same supper every time. It was asparagus and cheese bake, and every time I taste it, I see Jacques Cousteau in my mind. He did make it very accessible.
Accessible, and I
and
think
that's what
this,
those books
this
are.
bloke is doing the
Yes.
same. Yeah.
And Jackie.
Mine was Holding, Holding, just Holding. I don't know why. Holding, published in 2016 by Graham Norton.
Thank you, both of you. Now, thank you both. We have a strange thing in December because if you count the fourth Tuesday, it's actually Christmas Day. So I'll need to talk to the station and ask what day we will be broadcasting on. So please keep an eye open on the schedules on the webpage, but we might be on Christmas Day. So thanks again for coming and joining me, and I hope you all, our listeners, get out there, look at books, buy books, read.
And go to the library
And
too.
go to the library. Thank you all.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.